Week, the Environmental Protection Agency is expected to rule on a petition filed on behalf of residents of a small town outside New Orleans. They are saying enough is enough. Surrounded by 6 chemical plants, residents of Convent are now fighting plans to build a 7th. They tell ABC's Anderson Cooper they're being targeted because they're poor and black.
Traditionally, there were the plantations. That was huge tracts of land.
The air was clean. Everybody helped everybody.
And from then, the plants started coming in.
You put all of this junk on us.
Toxic chemical exposure.
We never had that before. We never had that before.
The smells of poverty and pollution hang heavy in the air around Convent, Louisiana. A town of some 2,000, there are nearly a half-dozen large factories here, belching smoke and fumes daily into the Louisiana sky. But plans by a chemical company called Shintech to build a $700 million polyvinyl chloride plant on this plot of land have outraged residents.
Environmental racism, environmental injustice. It's not fair to come and put all that pollution there, and all this poverty still exists there.
Imelda West and a group of her neighbors believe companies like Shintech build in places like Convent because they know the population has little power to stop them. 80% of the people here are African American, and 43% live below the poverty line.
It's a case of exploitation of poor people in the name of profit and greed.
Pat Melishon is petitioning the Environmental Protection Agency to deny Shintech a permit based on the issue of environmental justice. It's the first time the EPA has been asked to make such a ruling.
If Shintech were to locate here, that would be 4 of 5 facilities that would be located within a 2 to 3 mile radius. So we're not only impacting people with the toxic emissions, but we're making an already extremely vulnerable community more vulnerable.
Those who oppose Shintech building a factory here in Convent have been emboldened by a 1994 executive order signed by President Clinton. The order basically says that no low-income or minority group should be disproportionately exposed to environmental pollution, and it gives federal agencies the power to regulate environmental justice issues. Shintech insists its plant is safe and denies that Convent's racial or economic makeup had anything to do with locating here.
This site is the best site for the type of plant that we want to put in place. We looked at virtually all of them, and this is one of the few sites that meets all of the physical criteria.
Not everyone in Convent is opposed to Shintech. Carol Godin and her neighbors welcome the company, believing it'll bring much-needed jobs.
They have said, we want to be your neighbors. Can we help to develop your community? And we have said, yes, we need that.
But Shintech has only 165 full-time jobs to offer, many of which will require previous experience, something few local people have. In the past, other companies' promises of jobs have been broken.
You know what they can do for me? And I want the whole world to know. Do it in handwriting. You understand me? All the promises they're going to give, so much more than our other industries give it to the people in handwriting.
For now, the people of Convent must wait for the EPA to decide if this is, in fact, a case of environmental justice. It's a decision that's bound to further divide this once quiet community, where residents dream of economic development, but worry it comes at too high a price. Anderson Cooper, ABC News, Convent, Louisiana.
Tonight, a story from Convent, Louisiana. In this small River Road community located in the heart of St. James Parish, a controversy is brewing that has caught the attention of the federal government. It is the proposed site for a controversial $700 million chemical plant destined to be the 2nd largest of its kind in the world. The Japanese chemical company Shintech has set its sights on this 3,700 acres of sugarcane fields to produce polyvinyl chlorides. But the company has hit some opposition. Several residents here worry about the plant's emissions and the threat of an industrial accident. But plant officials promise economic opportunity and 165 permanent jobs. The controversy, however, is more complicated than the typical arguments pitting jobs against the environment. Environmentalists and government regulators alike say it could become a test case for environmental justice. across the nation have come to realize that government regulators may not always provide environmental protection. In Louisiana, many of those same communities are engaged in what they call life and death struggles. So consequently, they say they're not waiting for governmental agencies to develop a new environmental protection arrangement.
There is a new struggle that faces us. This environmental racism has engulfed all of our communities. And I hope you know that it doesn't matter whether you are from St. James or whether you're from the avenues. The same threat is all around. Whatever affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly.
In the last few years, government and industry has had to contend with a growing number of people from all walks of life who are becoming true believers in the environmental movement. Out of sheer desperation, these homegrown activists are learning how to fight back.
We have come together here in the face of a terrible evil, the pollution, contamination, and destruction of the only environment we have, the one that has to sustain us and sustain our children and future generations.
A case in point is Pat Melanson of Convent, Louisiana, a small River Road community in St. James Parish. Melanson is a deeply religious woman and mother of 6 children. Given her mild manner and quiet demeanor, she might seem an unlikely candidate for the role of fiery-eyed environmental activist. Yet that is what she has become.
We don't want an apology from the government in 15 years because of the Holocaust that are going on in our communities. This is environmental genocide at its worst.
When Melanson was notified last summer by a St. James Parish councilman that the Japanese company Shintech, Inc. had plans to build a massive polyvinyl chloride plant near her community, she became fearful of the possibilities.
Once I started researching and studying and talking to different experts and got involved in it, it took a life of its own. And naturally, when we realized how dangerous a PVC, EDC, VCM, a chlorine facility would be, we were very much against it, and we very much knew that we had to stop it.
We being the St. James Parish Citizens for Jobs in the Environment, a group made up mostly of local housewives and volunteers. For years, its members have fought for tight anti-pollution regulations on existing facilities, strict reporting of accidental chemical releases, and strong limitations on new industry.
We got to do it. You know, it's like we have to get in there and do it. But you get so tired sometimes.
With Melanson's leadership and the help of an attorney she hired from the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, the group plans to exhaust every legal and administrative remedy in their fight to keep Shintech out of their neighborhood. They're hoping that the EPA still has the jurisdiction and the authority to revoke the permit that the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality has already issued to Shintech.
This is a clear-cut case of environmental racism or environmental injustice. We filed an environmental justice petition on April 2nd. We've also filed a Title VI administrative complaint, which is a civil rights complaint. And there are perhaps more actions that are going to be filed.
The racial makeup of St. James Parish is nearly even, 49% black and 51% white. But U.S. Census records show that the area where Shintech wants to locate is 87% black. Parish-wide, the high school graduation rate is 75%, but only 50% in the proposed area. And while the parish unemployment rate is roughly 11%, around the proposed Shintech plant, the unemployment rate is 62%.
You know, we look at this area. We are one of the most industrialized parishes in the state, if not in the nation. Yet, in the Convent area, we have 62% unemployment. If industrialization is supposed to bring economic prosperity and jobs, then why do we in the Convent area have 62% unemployment?
The community is heavily industrialized with 2 oil refineries, 3 chlorine processing plants, and other industries that operate within a 3-mile radius of the proposed Shintech site. Of the 23 million pounds of toxins released into the air annually in the parish, 22 million are released in a 4-mile radius in and around the Convent area.
EPA has designated this community as an environmental justice community based on the demographics of the area and the TRI data. So we know that we are an environmental justice community, the type of community that the President in his executive order was speaking about.
President Clinton's 1994 executive order says that federal agencies must ensure that people of color and poor communities are not disproportionately affected by the siting of toxic facilities in their neighborhood. That order has become central to the argument over the Shintech proposal. In March, the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, on behalf of 19 environmental groups in Louisiana, asked the EPA to use Clinton's order to reject the Shintech permit. It was the first time that the environmental agency had been asked to reject a permit on the grounds of environmental justice. The request was bolstered when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission announced on May 2nd that it had denied a license to Louisiana Energy Services, which had sought to build an $855 million uranium enrichment plant near Homer. The commission's action was the first time that a federal agency had used Clinton's order on environmental justice to deny a license or permit. On April 3rd, Samuel Coleman with the EPA sent a letter to DEQ Secretary Dale Gibbons and told him he better deal with the environmental justice concerns expressed by the St. James residents, but gave him no other guidance.
We have searched high and low for formal guidance on that. There's really not much in place. There's none that is promulgated as a rule on that thing. We have a small group of people, a staff here that we're one of the few states in the country that has a group that's detailed primarily to working with this subject. We don't call it environmental justice anymore. We call it community and industrial relations, because that's exactly what it is. It's trying to balance the information between both sides so that the people understand what's going on.
We did our own community relations and independently interviewed the people caught in the middle of this controversy, the residents living near and around the proposed plant site.
Well, I look like a fool going to talk about stop many plants. What can I do, one person?
You don't think you can do anything about it?
I wouldn't even bother to try. I wouldn't even bother to try to do nothing. They ain't asked us for them other plants come up here. They ain't asked us nothing. And what can get that plant worse than the ones they already got? How many explosions they done had at them? In the baby. Nah. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but I don't think so. Now, ask them a few questions.
You're living a dangerous life anyway, each day anyway. The killing, the drugs anyway, so why not a plan?
Do you think you'll get a job there?
Hopefully.
Stop.
Or at least if I don't, somebody around here do. And everybody sitting on the corner with drugs.
Have they come out here and told you that you might get a job at the plant?
No.
So this place is not going to be nothing but plants.
How do you feel about that?
But, see, a lot of things happen to people around those plants with all those chemicals and stuff like that. Sometimes they have a warning saying that something has escaped. We got to stay in the house and all that, in the air and all that. Like Texaco, one time it had gas or something escaped from Texaco. Then one time it had gas escaped from Freeport. And we have to be locked in the house. And we don't know what's going to happen to us. You know, a lot of things. So,
how do you feel about Shintech coming out here?
Well, that's another one. That I don't know what's going to happen with that.
If you could tell the people at Shintech something, what would you tell them?
I'll tell them just what I'm telling you, miss. You got to come around and talk to her? Huh? Oh, I figured he wasn't going to do that. And I did go down to that courthouse there and talk to Dale email. See? I know that. I know that much. But, dang, I never come around like y'all talking to us. Not them.
A woman they say has spoken with them is 66-year-old Gladys Maddie. Residents say she's been communicating frequently with the DEQ Community Industry Relations staff and Shintech officials. But Maddie says that DEQ and Shintech came to see her after she wrote a letter to the editor of the local newspaper denouncing the opposition. In particular, Pat Melanson for, quote, using race as a tool to intimidate federal and state regulators into kowtowing to their demands not to permit Shintech. She called Melanson and her group modern-day abolitionists for, quote, anointing themselves our champions and protectors.
We didn't even know when Pat Melanson and all of them stepped in and emailed the West and all the rest saying that we was illiterate.
That you were what?
We was English, illiterate. And couldn't even speak for ourselves. So they were speaking when I saw all of this.
I written a letter to Mr. Mason, telling him that I want the plant. We are interested in the plant. So that's why they start coming to see me.
DEQ Community Relations Specialist Janice Dickerson, who is alleged to have written the letter for Maddie, also denounced Melançon's group at this NAACP Environmental Justice Rally.
Well, what justice is all about is allowing people an opportunity to speak for themselves. And anybody got a problem with that, they don't like justice. And they don't like environmental justice, so apparently you got a problem. I think everybody have a right to speak for themselves, and that's what justice is all about. Now, when you get to the point that you want to be little Hitlers and little dictators, then you're not about justice, you're about suppression. So maybe you ought to look at what your real objectives are about.
Also protesting Melançon's efforts is Governor Mike Foster, who is supportive of Shintech. He is very upset that the company has been put on hold until this issue is resolved.
You got to understand that major companies have timetables. They don't have 8 years to build a plant. The market moves. If they've gone through the hoops they're supposed to and they've done the right thing, and we hold them up just to give them up. What they were trying to do is hold this plant up to the point where it's economically feasible not to come here, and they're going somewhere else. And Louisiana's going to lose a bunch of jobs.
The Tulane Environmental Law Clinic's work on behalf of the residents also angered Foster. After hearing that the EPA wrote a letter to DEQ asking the secretary to look into the environmental justice issue, he phoned Tulane President Eamon Kelly complaining about the clinic.
So the truth is, why should an alumnus of Tulane encourage their university? In fact, I got to tell you, the majority of the alumnus I've talked to from Tulane don't like this either. Nobody likes this but the Tulane Law Clinic. They're a law unto themselves. They have decided that they will decide who comes to Louisiana and decide under what rules. I mean, we have rules, we have regulations, and doggone it, this administration is going to make sure they're lived up to. The permits are going to be done right. They're not going to get any breaks. They're not going to get any special treatment. But then again, this group decides they're going to be the law themselves. It's almost like they are the vigilantes out there doing this on their own. And I don't think it's right. And I got to tell you, I'm going to encourage anybody from Tulane to do what they can to put a stop to it. And I can tell you this. I'm going to look differently at Tulane from a perspective of having major tax breaks. If what they're going to do is support a bunch of vigilantes out there, they can make their own law.
This is not the first time the clinic has angered a Louisiana governor. In 1993, Edwards threw a fit when the clinic's director, Professor Robert Kewen, denounced his plans to reduce the hazardous waste disposal tax. As for the Shintech case, Kewen says they got involved only after the citizens had gone to tremendous effort to try to find assistance somewhere else.
There's surely no way they can hire and pay lawyers, and there's really little chance that they can raise enough money to even hire decent scientists. And yet the other side has a team of lawyers working on this, a very large engineering firm working on it. They have a public relations firm that has been putting out press releases on it. And I think from the perspective of the citizens, they also have the entire state government working on their side, because the Department of Environmental Quality has not, in this particular case, been representing the interests of the citizens nearby who are concerned. If anything, the Department of Environmental Quality seems to think that its role is to assist and represent Shintech and make sure that Shintech gets the permits it needs when it needs them. So in some respects, it's a David and Goliath struggle, with the only thing that the citizens have, the only rocks they have to throw, are some student attorneys at Tulane and a few volunteer scientists that are helping out.
They say that your failure to appreciate the people's need for representation is going to backfire because it makes you look like a bully, I'm just quoting, and that you don't respect the right of the citizens to speak out on a matter that affects their health and welfare.
Tell them to spend their own money and do it. Quit spending Tulane's. How's that? Who's the bully? The big fat professors drawing the big salaries, trying to run people out of the state to Texas? Or me, who's saying, please come to Louisiana, give us some jobs, jump through the hoops and do it right? I don't see that as a bully. They're trying to bully me by saying, well, you can't ever criticize us. We're perfect. We're academia. We can hide behind this type of thing. We can do anything we want. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the law. We'll make up reasons to run people out of the state. Now, I don't see that being a bully.
What about it?
I'm for the people of this state having some jobs here and not letting a bunch of professors on big salaries sit there and run people out of the state.
Now, the people in St. James Parish, they believe that the jobs that Shintech is going to bring are not enough and that they're concerned for health and welfare.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Who represents the people of St. James? The governing bodies over there that are elected, do they want Shintech or not? I suspect that they do. So again, you're not talking about the will of the people. You're talking about the will of a few people who have been encouraged by a bunch of people on big salaries that just don't like it. Look, those guys would like to see the whole state trees, but the problem is there got to be some jobs in this state. These guys are going to get their big fat salaries whether there's any jobs in the state or not, so it's easy for them.
Do you go looking for clients?
I think there's either an enormous misunderstanding about how environmental law clinics or any law clinic operates, or in fact there's being misinformation distributed. We at Tulane made a decision when we started this clinic that we would not take on any case where the client group was seeking to recover money for some injury either to their person or their property. In other words, we don't do tort cases. We are not ambulance chasers to the extent that some lawyers might be considered ambulance chasers. We're not out there trying to get money either for ourselves or someone else. The only thing we do and the only kinds of cases we address are cases that seek to enforce public laws, laws that exist on the books, laws that the legislature passes, laws that the Constitution provides, just to ensure that people obey the law.
Under the Louisiana Student Practice Rule, students in their last year of law school are allowed to represent either poor persons or community organizations that otherwise cannot afford an attorney. And the way that happens is they're allowed to go and appear before courts under the supervision of a member of the faculty as a way of getting the kind of lawyering skills they need when they graduate from school. So both the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic and all clinics in Louisiana are programs that law schools run under the supervision of faculties with student attorneys, in which as much as possible, the student attorneys do the work as a way of getting experience and giving something back to the community for free.
Once a lawyer agrees to represent a client, that lawyer has an ethical obligation to zealously represent that client's interest, whether the lawyer agrees with the position of the client or not. And that is all the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic is doing, and that is all the students are doing, is once the decision is made that these citizens are surely worthy in this proceeding that will involve putting literally millions of pounds of toxic chemicals into their community, to having some legal representation to make sure their voice is heard. Once that decision is made, by law, we have to zealously represent our clients' interests, and we surely will continue to do that until a final decision is rendered.
So despite what's happened, you're not backing off?
I can't back off without violating my obligation and ethical responsibilities as a lawyer, and I wouldn't back off anyway, because without us they have nothing.
And they are plowing forward. Tulane Environmental Law Clinic attorney Lisa Levy and Pat Melanson are on their way to the St. James Parish Courthouse to file another lawsuit challenging the parish president and the St. James Parish Council's issuance of a coastal use permit.
We're asking the judge to remove St. James Parish, the president and the council, from the decision-making process altogether, to invalidate the permit because they indicated a bias in favor of Shintech and against the St. James Parish, the St. James Citizens for Jobs in the Environment.
At the heart of the bias issue are 3 documents prepared by the parish and sent to Shintech officials profiling the Coastal Zone Management Advisory Committee and Planning Commission by their race, sex, and attitude toward industry.
That indicates a serious problem and a bias in favor of Shintech to give them this information.
But Dale Email, the president of St. James Parish, doesn't see it as a serious problem.
Basically, I view that, as to analyze it on a sports, on a sport issue. Like if you were playing a football or baseball game, you'd want a recruiting report or a scouting report, let's say, on the opposing team or whatever team you're playing on. So, Shintech representatives wanted to know the makeup of the various boards and commissions, not just the coastal zone, with the Planning Commission, and we sent that, whether you call it dossier or whatever, we sent it on to everyone that's on our boards and commissions. And basically what we put was, you know, what type of individuals are on the board, what the makeup of the board, whether they're employed, whether they're retired, whether they're like outdoorsmen, or, you know. So basically there's no more than a scouting report to Shintech, so they know who the players are. I don't feel it gave anyone any unfair advantage whether or not to give the permit or not.
There was also some flyer that was sent out by the parish president's office, or actually by the Office of Economic Development, which is under the parish president, sent to people in the parish, asking them to send letters to DEQ supporting Shintech before the whole decision-making process was over with. And basically, my clients just want a fair decision, an objective decision-maker, somebody who's, you know, going to look at the facts and make the right decision and not have an interest beforehand.
They say that they want someone who can make a fair decision. You think you can make a fair decision based on this, based on what their view as fair is?
No, not based on what their view as fair is, because I don't think you'll ever satisfy them. You know, I think they're in this thing for the long haul, and you know, there's no middle ground here. You know, the only thing they'll settle for is for Shintech not to locate in St. James Parish.
As the group understands it, the South Louisiana Port Commission, in conjunction with the parish, is marketing all of the available properties and river frontage for chemical and plastics manufacturing plants.
So they've already zoned unofficially, only unofficially, because there haven't been any public hearings on it to have public input. They've zoned our area industrial development. They could care less that they're squeezing people in between all of these major, massive chemical facilities, that the people who are here cannot get out. The majority are too poor or too old to move out, and the young people are choosing not to stay here. So our community is not being built up. Our community is being destroyed. We are not going to survive as a community. The convent community as we know it, knew it, no longer exists.
A few reminders still exist of what the community was like more than 100 years ago. This is the site of the former College of Jefferson, chartered in 1831, to offer a proper education to the sons of area planters so that they would not have to go to the north, to France, or to the College of Orleans down the river. Its founders were leading French Louisianians of the area, including Governor Andre Roman. Almost 100 years later, in 1931, the Jesuit Fathers of New Orleans purchased the beautiful campus and dedicated it as the Manresa House of Retreats, a spiritual sanctuary from the outside world for both Catholic and non-Catholic laymen. Some of the live oaks on the property are nearly 150 years old. Upriver is the Gothic Revival St. Michael Church, dedicated in 1833. The brick cathedral was built because residents grew tired of crossing the river to the town of St. James for church services. The interior of the church is ornate and colorful, but perhaps the biggest attraction is the replica of the Our Lady of Lourdes grotto hidden behind the main altar. It was added in 1876 and is thought to be the first such creation in the United States. Only 45 years ago, Louisiana was a simple, beautiful place, a sportsman's paradise boasting clean air and water. The landscape was flat, subtropical, marked by huge sugarcane plantations. The people along the river lived off fish plucked from its water, game trapped in the bayous, and vast gardens. In the 1930s, Louisiana first offered tax exemptions to entice petrochemical companies and oil refineries to locate along the Mississippi River. They came, lured by the state's vast natural resources of oil, gas, brine, and surface water. By the 1970s, a stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans was home to more than 100 chemical makers and refineries and became known as the Chemical Corridor. Today, it is better known by environmentalists as Cancer Alley, with the highest concentration of manufacturers, users, and disposers of toxic chemicals in the United States. As a result, the air is a gumbo of man-made chemicals that mix and react in ways scientists concede they don't fully understand. Millions of pounds of toxic chemicals go directly into the Mississippi each year. people are affected too. The Green Index, published by the Institute for Southern Studies, ranks Louisiana last among all states in environmental health, and parishes along the river rank among the highest in the nation in deaths caused by cancer.
And you began to get down to the real issues.
Former Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality and current chair of the LSU Institute for Environmental Studies says if you look at the data, Louisiana is acting more like a developing country than a developed one.
We've got a bad setup here. Essentially, the way I look at it is that it's subsidies. Louisiana grants huge subsidies to these big corporations. These subsidies because they get very cheap energy, the cheapest of the 48 states. They're allowed to pollute more than any other state, and I have measures to show that. And we have a tax structure that's very regressive, so we tend to tax the people of Louisiana, but not the big major corporations. So there's these big subsidies, and when you add them up for just those three areas I've mentioned, it's over $900 per person per year for Louisiana. That's a lot of money. That's over $4 billion a year, which is close to what we collect in taxes, total taxes.
And to show how much the state wants industry here, last summer, the Louisiana Department of Economic Development placed an ad in the Wall Street Journal and other national and regional publications. The ad features a businessman literally bending over backwards and the question, what have we done for business lately? In order to attract new businesses to Louisiana, the ad draws attention to the fact that Governor Mike Foster is the first businessman to run the state in recent history. But first and foremost, it focuses on the favorable business climate.
I look at it this way. You remember King Lear, he said when Arnold asked him, or he asked her rather, what she had to give to him, she said, "Nothing, my lord." And he said, "Nothing, out of nothing comes nothing." Well, if you don't have the plant, then out of nothing comes nothing. So to get the plant here, we have to compete with other areas. We have to compete with other places where they could locate. Not just in the United States, by the way, all over the world. We're indeed, as the President says, we're in a global economy, and we better face it. So we need these incentives because we do have a very skewed tax base.
That's the way it was done in many parts of the U.S. in the 1950s. It's not done that way anymore across the U.S. You only see the southern states doing this, and you see it in Louisiana granting these huge subsidies because we think we have to do that to get them to come here. We don't. They're going to come here. You couldn't keep them out with a stick, and I've had people in economic development tell me that in about those same words. They're coming for the Mississippi River, they're coming for the oil and gas, they're coming for the fact that the pipelines are here, they're coming for the fact that the other industries are here and they feed off each other. They're going to come. We don't need to give them these huge subsidies, and many of these subsidies are hidden. People don't even know about them, but they're there. And because of those subsidies, we're getting poorer over time, so it doesn't help us to bring in another big industry, especially a smokestack belching industry of the type that we tend to bring in. We should be concentrating on small businesses, on homegrown products, develop our local people and their skills, start small businesses. That's where the jobs are.
Nevertheless, state and local officials have taken very strong positions in favor of the Shintech proposal. Even before the plant had chosen the site for construction, both Governor Mike Foster and Parish President Dale Email had written letters to the Shintech president pledging their full support. But before choosing Louisiana, Shintech officials say they considered 35 sites along the Gulf Coast before settling on the St. James Parish location. Shintech controller Richard Mason says the St. James Parish location is attractive because of physical criteria, not because of the race and economic status of the citizens of the community.
We want to be sure that people understand what we're doing, that people understand the risks associated with what we're doing, that they understand our process, and that they also understand our company. One of the things that we have offered to do to virtually anybody we meet over here is get either myself or David Wise or our Vice President of Manufacturing, Mr. Irv Schrader, over here virtually on 24-hour notice to talk to anybody who wants to find out more about our company, find out more about what we do, find out how we treat our people, find out how we treat our neighbors.
Mason promises a safe plant. He says the plant would combine a number of chemicals, including vinyl chloride monomer, which is highly flammable, to create a granular resin used to make everything from vinyl siding to pipes for homes.
Vinyl chloride monomer, the primary dangerous chemical, is undetectable at the fence line, okay? You can't find it, all right? It's not present in quantities that can harm anybody, even with prolonged exposure over a lifetime, okay? So what we feel is that as people better understand what we do, how we do it, what the inherent dangers are, that they're going to be a lot more comfortable with our process and with us.
And certainly there are those who welcome Shintech, those who dream of a better future for themselves and for their families.
I have a job now. I work on a river. You know, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. I would like to work on a land-based plant, you know, where I know at least I'll have a future. And one day when I do decide on having a family, raising kids and everything, I know I'll see them every day.
A lot of us young guys around here cannot get hired into none of these chemical plants. Right now in these plants, it's all about who you know, it's not about what you know. And if they're gonna hold up and do what they say do, sure, a lot of us will have the opportunity to get a good job and provide financially for our family and have some kind of retirement to fall back on. But as it stands now, we don't have that. We have to go out and scratch and scrap for everything we want to provide a somewhat good life for our family. You know, we want a good paying job just like the next person.
What we've told people is that we're going to guarantee people equal opportunity. Obviously, this is a two-way street. People have to be trainable. They have to be able to read and write and do basic math, have maybe some computer skills. However, our type of industry, we're looking at employing approximately 250 employees, 165 for the company, and approximately 90 permanent contractors. We feel like this type of economic activity is vital for the prosperity of the state of Louisiana and the prosperity of St. James Parish.
Are conditions going to improve for the communities around here?
Well, I want to address that at a couple of different levels. First of all, we are a business, a profit-making corporation. My responsibility is to the owners of our business. My primary responsibility is. But I feel very, very strongly that the best way for us to be successful is the way we've been successful in Freeport, Texas, which is to be part of a community that's got a good school system, that's got a good tax base, that's got low unemployment, where everybody has an opportunity to succeed.
If Shintech is allowed to locate in St. James Parish, the company will get close to $120 million in tax exemptions. That includes property tax and enterprise zone benefits. The Secretary of Department of Economic Development, however, says the plant would pay $5.6 million in sales tax while constructing the project, and an additional $1.5 million in tax revenue would accrue to the school board in indirect sources.
Will that community improve with Shintech coming out there?
Well, I guess you just have to look at communities like Geismar and up and down the river where the industry has been established for quite a while. By the way, St. James is not that well developed at the present time. But I think with this addition and with some of the other plants that we have going in there, for example, the Kobe Steel, Georgetown Steel, some of those DRI project companies, I think that the standard of living, the quality of life, the per capita income, all those statistics are up.
The statistics may be up, but for longtime parish residents, things haven't changed much.
How was it a long time ago?
Well, somewhat like it is now. For the poor people, we're still in the same rut we was a long time ago, so it haven't changed much for us. I don't suppose it will.
While the community may be divided between jobs and protecting the environment, many citizens in St. James Parish have made it clear that more chemical industry is not the kind of economic development they desire.
We are sitting on a time bomb. What we have in St. James Parish, especially in District 4, in the Convent area, is a Bhopal on the Mississippi. What is it going to take for our officials to wake up and to realize that for $700 million of capital investment, you cannot bring back a human life? For $700 million, you cannot bring back hundreds of lives. So they need to wake up and to realize that they have to put people first and quit putting profits first.
Environmental justice issues are now being raised in this country and around the world. The siting of the proposed Shintech plant in St. James Parish is significant because it is on the verge of becoming a national test case for determining what an environmental justice community is. The Environmental Protection Agency hasn't quite defined what that is yet, so everyone is waiting to see what will happen in Louisiana. The EPA will decide by July 21st whether to object to the St. James Parish Council's issuance of the coastal use permit based on the environmental justice and the other grounds that were raised in the lawsuit. That's our report for tonight. Thank you for joining us.
This story is really one of the biggest environmental stories that hit the state in years. The Shintech is a Japanese company that wants to build a poly-vinyl chloride plant in St. James Parish, and it would, the whole industrialists all over the country, in Japan and Europe, are watching this permit because this would be the first full-scale, from the ground up, petrochemical plant built in the United States in the last 20 years. It's not easy to get a permit to build one of these, and the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic took up the case of some residents of St. James Parish opposing the plant, and they have raised the very explosive issue of environmental racism, or environmental justice as they call it, saying that the petrochemical plants, not just Shintech, but as a whole, and particularly on the industrial corridor between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, have located plants in areas where there are a lot of poor people because they would be less able to, fight them, and would need, to work more. Of course, the chemical companies and chemical industry says that's ridiculous that we put chemical plants near the river and railroads, and that, sometimes poor people live in those areas too. They try to locate their plants with as fewer people as possible. But it's become a really big issue. Greenpeace is very much involved. They're trying to stop PVC plants all over the world. And the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic has become a flashpoint in this because they, to the governor, because they received some state subsidies, some professors are subsidized in the whole school, that is. They get some tax breaks. So the governor is saying that they're practicing vigilantism and that they're working against the state and trying to bring jobs into here. And of course the law clinic is saying this is an adversarial relationship. Shintech has been out working that community, trying to get people, to support them, and we're trying to just work with some of the people who want to stop it. The issue's not going to be decided in Louisiana. The Environmental Protection Agency is set to make a ruling in September on whether or not to overturn the permit that has been issued by the state. And in the meantime, this has opened up a whole argument in Louisiana. People are claiming that Mike Foster is using heavy-handed means, even saying that Tulane alums ought to stop giving money to the school because they're hurting the state. And this touched off a real debate over his stifling academic freedom. Well, on the other hand, there's a debate even over the nature of the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic. A lot of Tulane law alums resent the fact that the school has opened a lot of these clinics that have kind of varied away from the idea of strict, legal education. So it's caused, there's many battles going on here, and the governor has walked right into the middle of it, and if it becomes a big national story, he's going to, he could be branded as the one who is working against the people who are claiming that the industry and that the politicians are trying to target poor people to about where to place industry.
There's a protest tomorrow against the governor on the steps of the Capitol.
That's the kind of, the environmental community has really unified on this issue, and when the governor sets himself up as an opponent on this, he becomes a very easy target. And so we'll probably see more of that.
The Southern Christian Leadership Conference has come out very strongly
in opposition also.
Yeah, although the NAACP has been sort of neutralized because the president was out walking the streets of Romeville with the governor, and because the people there generally support it. They're poor, they would like to have the job. But some of the people who live 4 or 5 miles away, they don't want it, and they're fighting it. And so it's not just a, and what the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic is saying, this is not just an issue of Shintech and Romeville, it's the whole industrial corridor and the policy of how we've been permitting and citing plants, for the last 30 years.
This is likely to become a test case for the environmental on this issue. Right. On environmental racism.
And so far, the Clinton administration has been pretty liberal on a lot of its environmental policies of late. On the ozone standards came out being a lot tougher than people in Louisiana, the political leaders wanted. So this will come down to be a decision probably made at the very highest levels of the Clinton administration.
All right. Well, Errol, before that decision is made, what do you see that we ought to be looking for?